We found that some of the best performing paid fundraising ads that we did were testimonial from somebody who says, hey, I've been giving to such and such an organization for the last 5 years, and this is why I give.
That authentic content is what makes people relatable, and ultimately that's what builds trust. How do you build trust with your donors? You show them real faces and real voices through that authentic lens. There's nothing better than social proof.
Natalie, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
So great to be with you, Dave. Always a pleasure to see you.
Oh, man. Well, and I think I first became aware of you because of the work that you do at MemoryFox, which we'll get to in a moment. But you and I have gotten to hang out at a few mutual conferences and events together, definitely invested into the broader nonprofit philanthropic sector. And I love the work that you guys do to help empower stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think back to the first time we met, I think it was actually through that fundraising AI summit, right? In person.
Yeah.
And I have to laugh. I'll give Tim Lockey a hard time for this because he had one of those moments that Nathan Chappelle, who I know is a former guest of yours on the podcast here. But I kind of a few years back in New Orleans, we were all sitting around a table and Nathan Chappelle was sitting there and Tim Lockey looked over at him and said, "And who are you?" And we all laugh about it to this day that, Tim Lockey not knowing, of course, knowing full
Right.
well who Nathan Chappelle was. But sometimes when you live in this virtual world and you meet people in person, it's hard to place them. And I think I did the same exact thing with you, where I knew who you were, but we had never had a lot of face-to-face, just email exchanges, really, and LinkedIn exchanges. And so to have that embarrassing moment of course I know who you are. And how did I have to even ask?
Well, the context switching, that's the thing, is like, you're like, no, I don't know you from this, like, even channel, right? Like, I know this person from LinkedIn, or I know this person because they wrote a book, or I know this person because I've listened to their podcast, or, fill in the blank. And so yes, but I love, and you and I got to hang out in San Francisco. I think we got to hang out in, oh man, where was that other place? I think it was Dallas, actually. And just the chance to be in person, though, is just my happy place, right? Like, as much as I'm a digital native, whatever that means, it's like, but to actually get to hang out, that's where it's at.
I'm so with you. There's nothing like the energy that you get from being around people.
I have a question for you. You were recently, speaking of hanging out in person, you were recently in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, where I'm based, for AFB-Icon, and I noticed that you spent a little bit of time up here. So I have a question for you. What was your favorite Pacific Northwest spot when you visited here this last time?
Oh, that's a great question. It's so beautiful up there. It's almost hard to isolate one area, and I've been fortunate enough to be there a couple of times now. But on this particular last trip, my husband and I did a little pre-traveling before Icon. We spent some time on Orcas Island. I had been to San Juan Island before, kind of driven through Whidbey, spent a little bit of time, just day trip through Whidbey. But the place we had on Orcas Island overlooked the water from our balcony, and it was right in the line where the ferries passed each other all day, all night. And so we just kind of took a lot of the week to just work out of this really beautiful condo and overlook the water. And it was just so calming and so peaceful, and absolutely fell in love with Orcas.
Oh my gosh. By the way, did you go to that ice cream shop in the little town in the middle of Orcas Island? I kind of live my life by desserts, so this may be putting you on the spot.
You are speaking my love language. I'll tell you, in San Juan, when my mom and I traveled there years ago, we first got introduced to Lopez Island Creamery. Please tell me you know them.
I know of them. And that might actually be, that is another for our listeners that are not from the Pacific Northwest. The San Juan Islands is like 200 islands, but those are a couple of the big ones. But yes, Orcas Island has, in my opinion, the best ice cream shop in all of Washington State. So now you need to go back.
So future return visit. I will go.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with this, so I'm now going to have to go look it up on the map and figure out what I'm missing out on.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Such good memories. Okay. So one of the things that I really appreciated when you and I were chatting about doing this show was not just the work that MemoryFox does to tell stories. And again, we will get to that in a little bit, but candidly, your background with storytelling, right? And so as I understand it, you spent some time in the wine business, but then you actually worked at a charity that really focused on telling the stories of veterans turned farmers. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, sure did. And you're right. I started, like any, well, not like any, but like a lot of college kids who are just graduated and trying to figure out what am I doing next. I was just trying to figure out what can I even start by dipping my feet into. And so I did end up just falling into the wine industry, which was wonderful, a wonderful start to my career. I got a really solid business foundation there and appreciated that. But that's kind of what started this love affair with agriculture, so to speak. And so after doing that for about a decade, I just started to feel like, I want to do something that feels like I'm really making an impact and a difference in people's lives. The social good sector was kind of calling my name. I didn't know exactly what that looked like, but
Mm-hmm.
fortuitously, I ended up at Farmer Veteran Coalition and had the total privilege of writing some really powerful stories. They're getting to tell really powerful stories of these veterans who really had served our country once by defending it and now are serving it a second time through feeding their communities, growing foods of all type, like you name it, across the board. We
Yeah.
represented every different facet of agriculture. And so there I started to write these stories on behalf of these veterans to share, like, here's what they had done in the military, here's where they served. These are all their wonderful accolades. And now that they've returned home and are looking really for that secondary mission and that new purpose, which farming can be so therapeutic in offering them that new life purpose, I got to share what they're doing now, what they're growing, what that looks like, how they started from the ground up, like literally ground up, and how they're feeding their communities. And I did that probably for about the first year that I was there. It was just written stories that I was writing on behalf of these members. And after about a year of doing that, I thought, you know what? There's got to be a different way that I actually allow these veterans who have lived this experience to share their own experience through their own voice. And that's when I myself started to dabble a little bit with visual storytelling and how do we represent them through photo shares or even getting them to hop on video and share a little bit about their background through video snippets. And really, when I started to realize how much that meant to these veterans to actually have a voice, to feel seen and heard and not forgotten about and like they mattered, that became the total turning point for me and pivot moment of how I never went back to telling stories any other way, but letting the person who's actually lived that experience share their own story.
So I think this is a good point to insert, what does MemoryFox do? Because I think that there's some really interesting potential things that we can explore. And you and I've even started to talk about with regards to sustainable giving and fundraising, but just let's take a brief detour. So what is MemoryFox? What do you do? What does that mean in terms of this? You're referring to visual storytelling, but concretely, what does that look like?
Sure. So really at its core, MemoryFox is a tool to help nonprofits really easily collect, organize, and share all their community impact stories. So whether that's allowing a volunteer to share a little video of the first time they remember volunteering with this organization, how it made them felt, or a program participant, the best thing that they've learned or accomplished through participating in a program, donor stories, clearly will resonate here. Board stories, any kind of story to really show a pic. And by story, I should probably clarify that could be a picture, that could be a video, that could be a text testimony. Any of those that are so important to from a testimonial standpoint to collect from your community to showcase the impact of the work that the nonprofit is doing to the community members. Ultimately, it's a tool to help nonprofits do that more easily and take that content that they collect on the back end and put it back out into the world.
Well, and from what I've seen, don't think, we sent a crew out to somebody's house to capture their quote unquote story. This is like selfie video, on their laptop. Like you said, sometimes it's just they've uploaded a photo and written a thing, but this is very much kind of, to use a more modern term, like user generated content, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly that. UGC, user generated content. That firsthand, that authentic that we know everybody craves these days, right? It's that authentic content that's coming straight from their voice through their device, wherever they choose to record it.
Yeah. And so, on one hand, you've got this idea, and some of our listeners will be familiar with this concept of social proof, right? It's not the president of the organization saying you should give to this charity because we do really important work, whatever. It's actually a donor or a volunteer saying this is what it means to me, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It can be any of those. That's the really wonderful thing about it is we encourage the nonprofits we work with to collect multiple angles, voices, perspectives to really highlight that 360-degree picture of the work that they're doing. So sure, maybe it could be the executive director or a program director or a case, case manager even. But you're right, there's also opportunity to really highlight it through the person who has gone through the programming or been on the other end of like the receiving end, so to speak. So yeah, all those
Yeah.
perspectives are important, right? We can't just highlight the work we do through one angle or one person's voice. We have to share it through everybody.
Well, and I think this is a really important point to accentuate, because I do think in fundraising, storytelling is not an uncommon topic, like the power of storytelling. But the thing, and I was thinking about this, I was meeting with a leader just a couple of days ago, and Natalie, he was like, all right, so help me think of the right stories to tell, essentially. Was, yeah, I think he said it better than I can remember it, but it was like, what stories would resonate, in this particular moment? And I said, in that moment, I said, you know what? I feel like it's about getting our audience to think of their own stories. And one of the things, I serve on the board of a local school foundation, and one of the things we talk about is how do we get donors or would be volunteers or would be board members to articulate why a quality faith-based education, in this case, should even matter to them, like, or why is it important to you? And I remember the first time I was asked that question, it was like, so Dave, why is this foundation important to you? And my first thought was, my kids go to school there. I was like,
Sure. Yeah.
I guess. And Natalie, I was like immediately transported though to 8th grade when I got the chance to go to a local private school because my mom had gotten a job there. We couldn't afford it, but she had gotten a job. And so little David got to go from a pretty big kind of rough environment to a much more small community oriented environment. And I had this flashback, Natalie, to when I was the first day on campus. The lunch lady like called me out by name, like said, "Hey David, come over here." And I thought, oh no, what have I done? Like, I'm in trouble. Because let's just say at the large public school, the lunch lady should not know your name unless you're in trouble. And so I had this flashback, Natalie, in my own story of like my own experience with that educational system, and candidly how much I ultimately blossomed over the next few years. But it wasn't the school foundation telling me, this is why, let me tell you a story of impact, which is powerful and wonderful. I'm not knocking that, but they actually invoked my own story. And so I think about like MemoryFox and the tools that you provide to not just help to tell stories to others, but actually help the people who care about the things to tell their own stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something we talk about so often is really you don't know what storylines you have to share, just exactly as you were touching on, until you actually ask the question. And sometimes it takes even asking different versions of the question to get people to understand what they even have to share. And so I think you touched on something so important, Dave. And again, this takes me back to my time at Farmer Veteran Coalition when I really started to try to share these visual representations of our members, get them to share their photos, get them to share video shares, for the primary purpose of stewarding our community. And what I mean by that is I wanted to show donors the people that we had the chance to work with and the wonderful things that they were doing. And I wanted to show all our volunteers and our board members. But I couldn't believe how many veterans just felt honored by the chance to actually share their story. And so that was empowering to them. But also, ultimately, isn't that the whole reason we exist, to give voice to these people that we're working with? And we can only make our programming so good as we know what it is that they need. And we have to give them the opportunity to share that. And so it's important to, I think, for our entire community, for them to hear directly from those people living it, to know what it is that is so meaningful to them in this life, but also what it is that they need to keep sustaining.
Yeah. Well, and I come back to that, the raw, authentic nature of it. This is not perfectly lit and, produced kind of content. It really is this raw content. Now, sound and, video are important. We want to get those well, but that kind of authentic, raw, this is a real person telling a story, not an actor who's, assuming a role, right?
It's so true that authentic content is what makes people relatable. And ultimately, that's what builds trust and helps create that one-to-one dynamic between people. So we talk a lot about, like, how do you build trust with your donors? You show them real faces and real voices through that authentic lens.
Yeah, I think back to some of the fundraising I've done in the past, and candidly, from a mass fundraising perspective, we found that some of the best performing, candidly paid fundraising ads that we did were a testimonial from somebody who says, hey, I've been giving to such and such an organization for the last 5 years, and this is why I give. And actually then literally using that in a fundraising ad was actually some of the most responsive ads that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's nothing better than social proof, right? That's what helps us see ourselves in other people and understand that this is the community that we want to be a part of. Even just hearing you talk about that, I always think back to this story I heard. So this is actually, I think, a Julia Campbell story, but I read it in Evan Wildstein's book. And the situation was, so there was this, I believe it was some sort of like drug and alcohol rehabilitation center in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
And this gentleman would come in every Friday and donate $5, give a $5 bill to the person sitting at the front desk every Friday, like clockwork. And I don't know if just nobody thought to ask, why do you do this? What is the reason behind this $5 contribution you give us every week? Until one day somebody like on the back end staff was kind of out and saw this exchange happening, and they just happened to ask this gentleman, like, what is it that inspires your $5 donation every week? And it was something along the lines of his son, who this was his weekly allowance. I don't know if it was his weekly allowance when he was a little child or what, but this was his weekly allowance. And he sadly lost his son to some sort of addiction. And he said, I don't want any family to have to go through what I go through or what I have been going through. And so I come in every week to give his allowance because I want to do it in his memory, but to help other people never have to be in the same situation.
That's incredible. I mean, so powerful. And the fact that that was his part of his cycle of remembrance of his own son and thinking about obviously investing in others, but his own story, right? I think so often I just think, and I do believe humans were wired for story, and we do learn in story, but I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, nonprofit leaders kind of err on the side of, well, then that means I need to tell a good story. Like I need to have, again, I've captured the right footage and I've edited it perfectly, and I've, like got every second of it down. But I think the piece that we can sometimes forget is that it's not somebody else's story. It's my story, and it's your story. And how do we invoke that? Not just I'm watching a movie, that was a good story today, kind of a deal.
Yeah, I love that you've touched on this, because something that Chris Miano, who's our MemoryFox founder, he often talks about Star Wars stories versus Springsteen stories. And he's a big
tell.
Bruce, yeah, he's a big Bruce fan.
Well, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I got the other side.
Okay, all right. We'll pull them both down. And as much as we all can appreciate Star Wars, there is something about like that movie thematic type of storytelling where you have that big rise and fall, and you have all those leading roles and supporting roles, and life doesn't always look like that, right? Life is sometimes messy. We all play our own role in our own stories, but it doesn't always follow that nice Star Wars or Disney pattern. And so telling those real, like on the ground, authentic stories, blue collar stories, people who have lived their lives, he is all in on leaning into those Bruce Springsteen stories because they feel relatable, and it's probably what more of us can relate to than those big, dramatized movie stories and movie lines.
Yeah. Can I confess something, Natalie? I don't really know Bruce Springsteen's story.
Oh boy. All right.
So you don't have to give me the full rundown, but like, why is that a good contrast to Star Wars?
I think it's just, well, you know what? We got to start you off with listening to a playlist, and then we'll reconvene and kind of put our heads together on
I'll listen to it.
But I think it's just, I would say it just comes back to his lyrics are just an everyday person living their everyday experience that probably majority of us can relate to.
I can hear that. I can do that. It reminds me of a whole offshoot we can offline about Malcolm Gladwell. You familiar with the author?
One of my favorite.
Okay. Do you ever listen to his? He actually did it as a podcast, but as well as I think it was a chapter in the book on why country music is like the best music.
Okay, I have not heard this, okay. But I am intrigued.
All right, because we're recording a podcast, I'm going to give you the spoiler alert. In about 5 seconds, I'm going to tell you the answer, but it's way more fun to listen to the whole podcast. So for our listeners, they can skip, but you can't skip, which is specificity. And the thing he talks about, and he plays country song over country song. And by the way, I'm not a huge country fan. I did listen to Garth Brooks growing up, but that's most of my country. But it's basically how specific the stories are. Like a lot of pop music is very much sort of like overarching. It's the Star Wars, right? It's the overarching like generic platitudes about romance or whatever and heartbreak. But like with a country song, it's like, no, we were in the laundromat eating Domino's pizza and whatever, right? Like it was just like so specific, like so relatable.
And the funny thing about that is I would argue that's probably the reason some people don't like it, right? Because of those details that you just shared. But
Yeah,
on the other hand, it makes it so catchy and so easy to sing along to. And gosh, leave it to Malcolm Gladwell. He's just the best at making those connections and weaving all the details together. And I am definitely going to go check this out. But you're right. There is such a specificity. I never thought about it in those terms, but I feel enlightened. Thank you for sharing that.
I love it. All right, well, let's talk about sustainable giving. So thinking about, especially with recurring donors, with sustainers, people who are like investing themselves in the cause, the way I always like to say it is that your recurring donors, your sustainer donors are some of the most loyal donors you have, period. And they show it not only in their giving, but in their volunteering. They show it in their additional giving and on top of their recurring gifts. So I'm just curious, do you have any like favorite examples of organizations that use MemoryFox either to engage recurring donors or to maybe just elevate that supporter voice?
Yeah, definitely. And we have a several that we work with, but I think what I'm loving, and also again, kudos to you on launching this wonderful podcast, but also how lucky are we as a sector to learn from you and really dive into recurring giving and sustainable giving. I love the trends I'm starting to see of more organizations adopt this. And I think we're still just so early on of people barely scratching the surface of what's possible, people who aren't currently, who haven't launched their own sustainable giving programs, starting to really figure out what are those details going to look like? How do we do this? But what I'll tell you is even just some examples I've seen of organizations we work with who maybe haven't completely endeavored into the recurring giving space yet, but have plans to and are going to take what they're doing well in their fundraising spaces and their existing connections with donors and now applying that to a potential future giving, future recurring giving program. One who's doing storytelling so well is an organization we work with called I Would Rather Be Reading. They're based in Louisville, Kentucky. They work with youth. They do a lot of trauma-informed literacy after-school reading programs, and try to get these kids who are maybe historically under-resourced in that area up to speed on literacy. And they have just done such a phenomenal job of leading with the youth that they work with. And these are young kids, probably like elementary school age kids.
Okay.
Leading with them, sharing through their eyes, their voices, their stories, how this is helping them become a better student or the best thing that they're learning from these programs. And so they ask really simple prompts. And these are, seconds long videos. They're not lengthy by any means. But when you take a few, like, let's say half a dozen testimonies from these kids who are saying, like, here's my favorite part of coming to the Educate and Elevate program, it makes such a powerful piece to then share back with donors to say, hey, thanks to your funding, here's all these kids that we're able to help. And what they have said is their donors need to hear it through the voice of the kids that they work with. That is so important. Again, just going back to what we were talking about, not hearing it from the ED alone, not hearing it from the staff or just the board, but from the actual people that are benefiting from these programs. And I'll tell you what they're doing really well is they run an annual fundraiser breakfast. They put together this piece that they built that painted the need as they try to expand the programming. They're in a certain number of counties and they're trying to expand to like triple that. And they need the funding to help get them there. And so what they did is they said, here is like the meek statistics. Here's why the work we're doing is so important, but we need to expand into all these other counties. And then they took those statistics and paired it with the actual stories of showing their kids doing, like they had the little alphabet, those fun little like refrigerator alphabet letters that they put on a piece of paper, or on not paper, but the little whiteboard. Yeah. And they had them spell out certain words and transition to other words, and actually showing them doing the work in action and getting the kids to share what they're learning was the most powerful combination of the storytelling plus the statistics to actually drive future donations.
Are you looking to capitalize on what's been happening with sustainable recurring giving? Join me for the Sustainable Giving Workshop happening this year from September 10th through the 12th in beautiful Tacoma, Washington. This exciting 2.5-day opportunity will be part summit, part workshop, part retreat, and all experience that you can use to start growing your thriving sustainable giving program. Set in the creative heart of Tacoma, just south of Seattle, this intimate workshop will blend insight-rich instructions with hands-on coaching and peer connection. We'll creatively explore and strategically plan to grow strategic giving for your organization, all in a setting designed to inspire. You'll leave with a customized, clear plan to grow sustainable giving at your organization, practical frameworks and fresh insight, and new connections with like-minded leaders, as well as a renewed sense of vision and energy for your work. I'm designing this experience to be personal, practical, and powerful. Space is limited, so I recommend reserving your spot as soon as possible. All you need to do is go online, read a little bit more, and register at sustainablegiving.org. Hope to see you there. One of the things I really love, and I talk about this in the book, I talk about this elsewhere, is how do we humanize the connection? And so one of the most powerful and, historically the strongest type of recurring giving program historically has been what I would call a one-to-one recurring giving program. And that is where the donor and the beneficiary are literally paired up. So sometimes in the case, the donor might actually know the beneficiary if they're providing staff support or some sort of missionary support or something like that. But a common, historical phenomenon has been this child sponsorship kind of concept where, I'm giving and I know somebody specifically receiving. But I think one of the meta lessons that comes from that is to humanize the connection. Like I, as a donor, am not giving to provide literature or, literacy programming in the case of, the organization. I would, it's more, I am connecting the dots to the kids who are being impacted by this work. And one of my favorite types of, it's not really one-to-one, but we call it representative sponsorship, where we can't tell you necessarily that your gift, is in a one-to-one relay, way supporting this particular child, but your gift is helping children like, so and so and so forth. And I love that this, thinking about this in a visual storytelling medium is you're literally saying like, I want you to meet so and so, and this is what that's meant to them. That's so powerful.
Exactly. And you're right. In that sense, you don't have to know exactly which child your dollars ended up
Right.
benefiting, because you're seeing all of them as a community. And isn't that the end goal, to build a community and build relationships through this sustainable giving program?
So it's really social proof on both sides. It's social proof on the beneficiary side, so to speak. Like these are people who are in the program who are benefiting from the program. But then also, do you have examples on the donor side of things, like where donors are sharing why they give to an organization?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no better way to encourage more people into a circle than a donor sharing why they give. And it could be a donor, it could be a volunteer turned donor. We've seen some of those. I think we talk a lot about how do you, I think there's oftentimes a missed moment. Somebody gives to an organization, whether that's a one-time gift or a recurring gift.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably have a story that they want to tell, and they're kind of sitting there behind their computer making this donation, and there may be somebody who they're giving in honor of, somebody they're giving in memory of. Maybe they have some like longtime connection to this organization that the staff doesn't even recognize, kind of like I was just sharing with that rehabilitation center. And so giving them the opportunity to share a little bit about why this mission is so meaningful to them right after they make the gift turns it into another way to then share with other potential donors, to invite them into the community and not only feel connected to fellow donors, but also have the opportunity to share their own story. And you're right, Dave, part of that is let's let the organization know why people are so connected to us. But part of it is just giving the person who is actually donating the chance to reflect on what's meaningful to them, or to remember somebody and acknowledge them through their donation in their own words.
Well, you're giving them a voice, right? And especially in that moment of donation, I think that's really important. I was talking to an organization recently, and one of the things that I was really trying to impress on them is like the half-life of that particular donor or potential donor's interest is really short. Now, they may care about your cause deeply, that may be a lifelong passion for them, but like the moment, that emotional, candidly moment in which they have decided or are considering a decision to give, that does not last as long as you might think. And so the idea of saying, hey, you just made a gift in this case, or you just committed to becoming a such and such a partner or whatever, to be able to say, would you tell your story? Would you take a couple minutes really quick and tell your story? And here's a super easy way to do that, and to
Mhm.
capture that. I mean, I think you've been in fundraising for a while, especially on the online side. You've seen the comments from people when you do the emergency relief campaign and the heartfelt stories like, oh gosh, I remember some real tear jerkers over the years, especially in moments of conflict or disaster, where people they're not just giving because they're altruistic. That's a part of it, but they're giving out of some deep personal motivation a lot of times. And to give them voice, not only is that beautiful for them, like, man, and I don't know if you have this, but it'd be fascinating, Natalie, to look at what the long-term value and retention implications are for anybody who, like, say, records a video or writes in a note versus those who don't. Because
Yeah.
there's
Ooh.
just something about, I can think of the times where I've told the story in front of a group of people, and I'm like, just the act of doing that is like embedding more deeply that cause into my DNA.
That's right. You're cementing your care for that cause by saying the words out loud.
There's something to be said about, like, moving from polished marketing about an organization's work to real stories from their community.
Definitely. One of my favorite uses of the MemoryFox tool that I think is definitely underutilized, and we're always trying to encourage more use of, is actually using your stories to educate. And what by that, it could be educating on the work that you do, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's educating donors, but it could also be educating program participants or the people that are benefiting from your services. And so here, I'll give you an example. So we worked with an urban league, actually in metropolitan Seattle, so right in your neck of the
Okay.
woods. And this was around the height of COVID. They realized that there were a lot of questions in their community from youth that they worked with, like middle school age style youth. And these kids had questions around both the virus and the vaccine. And so what they did is they ran this MemoryFox campaign. They sent out the link to these kids. And again, like you said, you just access it on your phone. They recorded themselves asking their whatever question they had. And then the nonprofit took these questions from the kids and sent them off to trusted doctors in their community, who then hopped on video and recorded their answers. And then they took the videos and the questions and the answers in video form and wove them into one larger produced, stitched together piece, and sent that out to thousands of people in their community all at once. And in part because, they typically would have done this in like a town hall style gathering, but because of COVID restrictions, they couldn't do that. They couldn't be together in person. But I just think, gosh, like, what a beautiful opportunity to look. They could have just as easily did this as like an FAQ sheet almost on their website and put the questions in text form and given people the same information. But when you're actually showing those questions represented through real human faces and real human voices, it's everything we talked about. It's creating that personal connection, but it's also making that individual feel like what they have to say is recognized and it matters. And so I just think there's so much opportunity to educate your program participants, but also then you're educating donors at the same time. And isn't that a part of the ultimate mission, is to just help people understand the reason behind the work that we do and the nuances of the work and the research behind the work.
I hadn't even thought about it that way. That's that's really good. That's really good. So I'm curious. I'm going to circle all the way back. So your work with veterans, like, why was that important to you?
It's a great question. I will say, and both my grandfathers served, but I don't come from like a long history of families having, or my family served. I was not a member of the military. I think, to be honest, what drew me to the role was more of the agricultural side.
Yeah.
Just living in a place that's so ag focused, having that wine background, wine and viticulture background. But I was drawn into the agricultural elements. But I will tell you, Dave, I just came to have such an appreciation for veterans working in that role. I learned so much about them, so much about what it was like for them to reintegrate into the world, how healing, like having your hands in the dirt and giving life to things could be for them. And gosh, that's just completely changed my perspective on all the wonderful work that so many different veteran serving organizations out there are doing. But I have to say, I got pulled into one half of the mission, but the beauty of that mission was not only was it helping veterans have this new mission in life, at the same time, it was helping cultivate and grow a whole new generation of farmers and food leaders. And I don't think most people know this, but here in the US, at least, the average age of the farmer these days, and this is actually going back to like 5 years ago, so I'm sure it's even older at this point, but it was like mid 60s back then. And
Okay.
this farmer population is just continuing to age. And there's not the same way that we used to have in family farms back in the day, which like that kind of that core unit is um, being a little decentralized. And so there's not this new generation naturally taking over those family farms and inheriting the knowledge from the older generation and learning from these existing farmers. And so the beauty of this mission is it really was dual purpose to help veterans find a new life purpose, but also create a new generation of farm leaders for us.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think you and I grew up in a similar era. We were talking earlier, and I was not born in a time in history where we had a military draft, and and so that's not been a part of my journey, but it was a part of my dad's, and he was I don't know if you would call it a child of the Vietnam War, but he was drafted during the Vietnam War, and so I've reflected on that we're all essentially born into a context, right? And in the case of my father, it was being born into a time in which there was a thing called a draft, and you didn't get to generally say no, right? And yet how that's shaped our lives, and just I love the idea of the combining that kind of um, working the land and the sustainability of that cause, but also the sustainability of what it's meant for veterans that are invested in that.
Well, and it's interesting. I'll tell you, it was really born out of, and you talk about the draft, but a big reason this nonprofit was born, and it only came to be around 2009, so it's what, just over like 15 years old now. Back when the wonderful man Michael O'Gorman, who founded the organization, he himself also is not a veteran. He was just a decades-long farmer, and as his son after 9/11, his son went off to serve in the Coast Guard. He started to hear these studies that were coming out from the Carsey Institute that said that there is a disproportionate number of our 9/11 all volunteer military. So again, like moving away from the draft and now into an all volunteer space,
Yeah.
disproportionate number of veterans who are coming from and being killed in action from rural areas. And it was
Rural
interesting
areas.
to
Okay.
rural areas. And it was interesting to learn these people who are deciding to go into the military, who are so service minded and oriented, are coming from and returning to places where there might be opportunity for them to, maybe they're returning to family farms or they have access to land. And he actually looked at all the veterans serving organizations at that time, and not one of them was occupying the agricultural space. And he started to think, maybe there's something I can do to help these people. And that's really how Farmer Veteran Coalition was born. And the amazing thing about, and I think this is a great model for every nonprofit, is from day one, he looked at every potential organization as a partner and not a competitor. And he thought, how can we build something together? And so really he went from building just the organization alone to building an entire military to agricultural movement. And now there's like something like 250 nonprofits and organizations in that space.
Oh,
When just
that's
15
so
years ago, there wasn't a single one.
Man, that reminds me of a couple things. One, we did an interview on the Purpose and Profit podcast with the folks over at Spring Impact, and they're a UK based group that helps organizations create sustainable impact. And one of the things they talk about, the main thing, is collaboration. And then a friend of mine, Peter Greer, wrote a book called Rooting for Rivals. Highly recommended if folks are leaning into that space. Okay, so Natalie, I have a game I want to play. So
Let's
I
do
don't know
it.
if you ever, since we are of a similar generation, did you ever read those books like the Choose Your Own Adventure books growing up?
Oh,
Does
you
that
know
ring a
what?
bell?
To be honest, I feel like I hear more about them these days than back in my
Isn't that
childhood.
funny? Like it's like when like Barbies come back or whatever, it's like the nostalgia. So I want to play a little Choose Your Own Adventure game.
All right.
And
Sounds great.
you get to choose. I'm going to read three possible paths, and each of them have their own twist. And I want you to just say which one speaks to you, and then I've got a question behind. It's kind of like choose, pick a door, and door 1, 2, or 3, but a much more fun version of that. Okay.
Yeah, this is exciting. Okay, I love it.
All right. So, all right, 3 possible paths. Which one speaks to you? So the path number 1 is the megaphone moment. Path number 2 is the secret joy. And path number 3 is the hidden truth.
Oh, all right. I'm going to go with the secret joy.
Ooh, I like that one. Okay. So this is the thing that lights you up. So what's one thing you love about sustainable giving, something that just lights you up when you talk about it?
I think it has to be, and I don't know, I'm going to put this into a kind of the idea that sustainable giving to me feels like bite-sized giving, that it's something that's palatable to anybody, making it accessible to everybody, right? So I think about like maybe there's an organization that is asking an individual, hey, and maybe this is a young individual just out of college, let's say, and they're just kind of getting their feet under them, and they say, hey, could you support us with, I'll just throw a number out there, $350 this year. Could you give $350 to us? And maybe to that individual, that just seems like a big number that's very out of reach and not doable. But then if you break it down into, hey, could you give it to us could you give us $30 a month? Which ultimately, you do the math, it equates out to the same amount. And $30 a month, I mean, that could be the equivalent of just a few beverages a month. And ultimately, like if you can put it in those bite-sized terms, then it becomes palatable for the individual, but also sustainable for the organization. And so I think that's like, for me, when I think of sustainable giving, how do we make it available to everybody so it's benefiting both the person who wants to give and be tied into a cause that they care about, but also helping the mission move forward on that predictable funding?
Yeah, it's really 2 sides of a coin, right? We think about it, certainly fundraisers think about it in the sense of sustainable for me, but I hope in its most healthy form, it's sustainable for those donors. And I can think of myself. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just you saying that got me thinking about, and I know you and Nathan were talking about the average number of subscriptions that people have these days, 12, right? Something around that number. And I mean, I'd be curious. I don't know if there's any statistics out there that show the breakdown of what those 12, like the different areas that those 12 are in. But wouldn't it be great if we could just have like a healthy balance of 50-50, or even something close to that, of like 50% of my subscriptions are for products or, whatever that might be. And then the other 50% is donations to causes I care about.
I love that. We'll figure that out. You can in your Rocket Money app, it does kind of break down by category. So there's probably actually some data out there that we could chase down. I love that.
You're right. There probably is.
I love that. Well, Natalie, this is super cool. Okay. So I've got a couple other questions. What's your favorite go-to walk-up song?
I love that. Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions to know what people would want to walk into, and for people who don't know what a walk-up song is. So this is what a baseball player, when they walk up to the plate, they have a song that plays that they have.
So basically, if you have been in the Savannah, what is it? Savannah Bananas? Is that what they're
Savannah
called?
Bananas, yeah.
Like YouTube short vortex that I've been in. That's the thing that they dance to on the way to the plate. But normally the baseball players don't dance.
That's right. But how much more fun if they would dance?
So much more fun.
So, I have to say, like, I feel like I still have not honed in on my exact right song. But my kind of go-to answer for that is 500 Miles by the Proclaimers. There's just something about like the beat of that song that I could just see myself walking into a room, or theoretically in the baseball era, walking up to the plate with. But yeah, it just, something about that song makes me happy. I actually have some of our best friends who, during their wedding reception, they played that song, and there was just this really fun moment of everybody in a circle jumping up and down to that song. So maybe that kind of like played a part in it too. But I just totally can feel like all the good vibes of walking into the beat and the rhythm of that song.
That is so good. I love that. What does it mean?
What is yours, Dave?
It's situational, and I have had a few. Thankfully, with speaking, sometimes people are like, "Oh, what's your walk-up song?" I'm like, "I don't know," and so it's usually related to the topic. But my favorite recent one was "Surfing on Top of the World," which I'm pretty sure is Beach Boys. Somebody uh, of another generation may correct me, but I believe it's Beach Boys. And I mean, I write the Wave Report, Natalie. Come on, I mean, like it's
It's
all the
so
surfing
fitting.
songs. So, "Surfing on Top of the World" was my favorite recent one.
That's a great one.
So, what does it mean to be a people broker?
All right. So, gosh, you're pulling out all the good questions here. So, people broker. Okay. So, this is years ago, a friend dubbed me the people broker. And I think it's because I love to bring people together. Like, so, you think about all your friends and families from different circles, different niches and spaces in your life that oftentimes that can be segmented and siloed, right? Like, I do things with this friend group, or maybe I have some like colleagues turn friends who I spend time with outside of the office, or maybe there's like play date friends or sports friends. And it's easy to just get segmented into those different groups and spend time with those solo. But I love getting to bring people together. I love the overlap of friendship circles and kind of seeing the magic that ensues when different people get to know each other from different backgrounds and maybe find something in common. Or like you, Dave, being a lifelong learner, how cool is it to just learn something from somebody else who walks a totally different path that you know nothing about? And so just like years of hosting theme gatherings where these people got to be present in a similar space, but meeting together for the first time and forming fast friendships, like honestly, there was nothing more
Oh,
fulfilling to me and for me than that. And so I think ultimately that just created and led to this title of the people broker. And I haven't worn that hat for a while, but I would love to take back on.
oh, you and I are kindred spirits. I mean, I can't, man, it just thrills me when you have like, oh, you don't know so and so? Like, you totally need to know each other. And especially to your point, when you get outside of your own spheres, that's why I'm a huge, if you're a nonprofit fundraiser or leader listening, like, get outside of your specific, I call them verticals, like, oh, I'm in relief and development, or I'm in whatever. It's like, no, get outside of your specific sphere of influence, because it's just so beautiful. Not only the connections, but also the ideas and the innovations that come from those kind of weak ties. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think I mean you're touching on something so important that it seemed like for me personally, I that was something that I really just got so much fulfillment out of and joy out of in a personal space, but now really like digging all into the nonprofit world, I think some of those parallels are coming in the nonprofit space. And how wonderful when it's not only people getting to form relationships, but also learn from each other, learn and grow alongside each other. That's what it's all about. And that's been really magical to witness.
I love it. What is one book you recommend?
Oh gosh, are we talking fiction, nonfiction, or any of the above?
I'm going to leave that one open to you.
All right. Gosh, I have such a long list, but the one that's popping into my mind is The Nature Fix
Okay.
by Florence. Is her last name Williams? Gosh, I'm totally forgetting now. Florence something. Are you familiar with it?
No, The Nature
Okay.
Fix.
The Nature Fix. Highly recommend it. She just does, almost in a way, I would say the way that she does these roundabout connections kind of is parallel to Malcolm Gladwell's presentation of content a little
Okay.
bit. Not, I mean, nobody can be a Malcolm Gladwell. He kind of carries his own name and title. He is unique. But she just does such a wonderful job of presenting why, like, what we're losing by not being in nature, what we gain from being in it, and why it's so critical to our overall health, mental health, physical health, all of that. Relational health, and just some really, I mean, I don't think that on its own is groundbreaking to people, but for me, there were just some really eye-opening statistics that she shared, and really beautiful things that